Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
Ta-da! And we're back. Hello, everybody. Once again, my name is Duck. This is Learning Photography with Duck, and I want to thank you for hanging out with me for the next hour and a half, 2 hours. Today is Photoshop edition, and we're going to be doing we're going to be taking a slight step back to something that we did last year, and that's trying to walk through a few edits and trying to simplify it as much as possible for you. And I'm just going to utilize just pretty much one one layer adjustment type, and that's the curves adjustment. And you've heard me before that the curves adjustment layers are probably the more powerful of all the layer adjustments in Photoshop. So, of course, utilizing that with masks, I'll walk through a few little different types of masking techniques. Something that we haven't done in quite a while. Manually creating masks and allowing Photoshop to help make masks for us. So we'll do that today. Okay. So first of all, what we got coming up. I am doing a presentation for CTPPA. It's called From Drag to Brag. It pretty much touches a lot of what I go through, the editing process here on this show for you guys, and how to, visualize a rather boring image and then apply, that roadmap that I kind of, teach you guys to try to do in anticipation of what kinds of edits to make. So pre-visualize, map it out, and then choose the appropriate adjustments to meet that perception. Okay. So anyways, it's going to be on March 20th. You do have to go to the ctppa.com website to register there. I believe it's $20. I'm not 100% sure. I think that's what they put it at. And of course, if you're a member of CTPPA, it's a free event, so anyway, if you're in a camera club, I can do that presentation for the camera club as well. So anyway, all right. And Bill, you say you want to come.
If you're interested, send me a chat. If you want the link, I can send you put your name and your email in the chat, and I'll send it to you tomorrow night at North Haven Camera Club. Laura Parisi, who's the vice president, and she does teach photography, and she's been a pro forever. She came from a family of pros. She's going to talk about how to take pictures of the total eclipse, and she will talk about how to photograph Bailey beads and diamond ring. You can look that up. I have no idea what she's talking about. Or better yet, you can come to the meeting tomorrow, 7 o'clock. It's at Hope Christian Church, 211 Monowese Avenue, North Haven. That's exit 9 off of I-91. Again, it's 211 Monowese Avenue. You can send me something in chat, or you can just show up. Now, she did say what she'll do. She prefers to use solar filters that do not screw on the front of your lens, and she'll show which filter she prefers.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to screw-on filters, especially when you get a filter that literally blocks out your normal vision. So being able to remove that filter temporarily is definitely a bonus. So I can see her point on that one. All right, awesome. Anybody interested in taking a ride up north for the solar eclipse? Anybody doing that? No?
I don't think there are any rooms left. I said this on a call
Yeah,
some
yeah.
time ago. I don't know how Laura and people from the club are going to go up there. Whether they're putting up tents or not, I don't know. I told you that Darlene Whitmore put in a reservation for her and her husband about a year ago
Right.
for a motel. And a couple of months ago, the motel owner said, no, we're canceling it. So he must have yes. So he must have
Whoa.
figured, I can get quadruple the price.
Oh, shady.
Just one other thing I'll say, if you use any of these third-party things for travel, my experience has been you're not treated like a first-class citizen.
Mm,
So yes, maybe you get a cheaper rate with one of those type of things, but you're
yeah.
best off dealing with the airline directly or dealing with the motel directly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, unfortunately for me, or fortunately for me, whatever you want to look at it, astrophotography has never been that big a draw for me. So photographing a solar eclipse for me is
It's not mine either.
there's no draw for it, so okay. All right, so let's get into it today. Let me switch over to my desktop. Okay. I got 3 images that I've pulled up that I'm going to go from kind of fairly easy to a little bit more complex, and utilizing, let me go here, utilizing Photoshop to kind of enhance the images. So even though right now this is in Lightroom, I'm only using Lightroom because, that's my content manager. I'm not going to do any of the edits in Lightroom. I'm actually just, these are the default out of camera, and I'm just going to port it over to, I'm going to port it over to Photoshop and do the edits there. So where's my Photoshop? There's my Photoshop. Okay. All right. So this first one, let me expand it out here, is a somewhat interesting but kind of plain brook during obviously not this year because we had like 0 snowfall this year. This is from, I don't know what year. This is from a while back, taken at Southford Falls. So this is the lower part of the falls where the stream comes down downhill from the falls just before it goes under the covered bridge. And I thought it looked kind of pretty with the water cutting through the trees and everything all blanketed over in snow. And one of the problems I've always had with any kind, I love being out in the woods. I think I mentioned this in the past. Growing up, I've always had acres and acres of woodland to roam around in. So that was my backyard all growing up. So I used to spend countless hours in the woods, and I loved it. And when I got my first camera, I wanted to capture the emotion, the sentimentality of being out in the woods. And I was always disappointed because all the images that came out, this is of course back in the film days, never matched my experience. And that's part of the reason is because I didn't edit any of those film images. I just developed them, sent them out for printing, and that was it. And I was always disappointed. And it wasn't until I got into digital and realizing that, you can bring out so much more with your editing. Obviously, it could have been done to those old film images, but I did not have access to a dark room to experiment like that. So, needless to say, I was always disappointed with my woodland photography. And of course, the woods here in New England, they're not anything spectacular either. So not like the woods that you find like old world forests like over in England and things like that. Those pictures, but I digress. So anyway, what I want to do is I want to do some color correcting on this because as you can see, it was a rather bleak day, and the brown, the kind of like that muted brown color of the trees, and the snow being very reflective, it picks up that color cast of its surroundings. So all this brown trees around the snow kind of gives the snow this yellowy blah cast. So what I want to do is I want to make it look more like fresh snow rather than snow that's been sitting around for a while. The white of the water coming down, I want that to look a little whiter, and maybe bring a little bit more life into that brown color of the trees. So and then obviously see if we can make that stream kind of stand out a little bit more. So those are my goals for this particular image. All right. This image, typical like architectural type image. I thought this was interesting because we have a lot of texture going on in the sky, but in order to maintain the tones of the sky and the tones of the white part of the structure in comparison to the tonality of the darker shingles, this is where you have to, when you're out in the field, you have to make a decision. Do you preserve the shadows? Do you preserve the highlights, in order to get a proper exposure, or do you split the difference? So in this particular case, what I did is I decided that I was going to split the difference, and I actually underexposed it a little bit in order to maintain the texture in the sky. Had I exposed for the building itself, then that pretty much this upper corner of the image would have just been completely blown out. So these are the kind of things that you have to keep in mind when you're out in the field. And it says, okay, these are the problems that I'm being presented with. What can I overcome in camera? Okay. So in camera, I could have properly exposed for the structure, all right? And that would have meant blowing out my sky. Or I could have, obviously exposed for the sky and, let the building fall into more of a shadow. But really, the sky is not the subject, all right? So intuitively you think, okay, well, I'm just going to expose for the building and just blow out the sky. But then I would lose all that nice texture. Then you can say, okay, well, that's a limitation of my equipment out in the field. I can push it one way or another. But understanding what is available to you in editing, you can say, okay, I can underexpose it, knowing that I can correct that exposure in post processing. And the benefit of doing that is I can control what part of the image I want to bring back up to a proper exposure in order to maintain the texture that I would otherwise lose out in the field if I did it with the camera. All right. Hopefully that made sense to you guys. Okay. So we're going to tackle this one. And then the last one, this was taken, obviously, in New York City, years ago. I haven't been there in a long time. But I thought this might be an interesting image to convert to a black and white and see what we can pull out as far as some interest in a black and white. Okay, so that's the goal for today. Those three. Okay, all right. So let's tackle that first one. Again, I usually start off my process right from Lightroom, and I would normally do some stuff in Lightroom, but like I said, this time I'm just gonna kind of like circumvent that and just go straight into Photoshop. So from here, Control E will open it up in Photoshop. Okay. All right. Let me adjust my screen here for 1 second. Okay. There we go. All right. So open it up in Photoshop, and so let's go ahead and mark this up and say, okay, what is it that we want to do? Okay. Well, the first thing we notice is that actually, let me go back to Lightroom and open this up in we'll go to the histogram. Okay. Oops. Histogram. All right. If we look at the histogram in Lightroom, we can see that everything that would fall in the heavy shadows, in the what Lightroom calls the blacks, all right, which is the really darkest dark shadows, all right, and the whites, which is your highlights, they're not there. All right, they're actually moved in a little bit. Okay, you notice that nothing is pressing on the edges. Okay, and we do have two prevalent areas, all right, which lies in our shadows, all right, and in our highlights. Okay, not our whites, in our highlights. Okay, and then we have a dip in our midtones. Okay, so typically when you see this type of histogram, it tells you that there's a bit of contrast. All right, when you have an extreme hump in your lights and an extreme hump in your darks, with that dip in the center, usually tells you that it's a contrasty image. And if we look at it, we can sort of say yes, because there's a distinct difference between the dark pixels in the trees and the light pixels in the snow. But overall, it's not what you would consider a high contrast image, because what's missing are those deep shadows. All right. So when everything kind of gets squished more towards midtones, we start losing that contrast, or that feeling of contrast. because it's the deep shadows that give us that contrast feel. Um, Obviously accented on the other side with brights, but we already have the brights. All right, they're not specular white highlights, but we do have a lot of very light snow. Okay, and if we look at the histogram, we can see that the spike for the highlights is a lot bigger. It's a lot greater than the spike for our shadows. So that tells us there's more information in the brights than there is in the shadows. So that off balance gives us the impression that we have a less than contrast image. Okay. I just wanted to point that out because that's one of the things that I want to do with this particular image is pull down some of the deep shadows into the blacks in order to give us that feeling of being a more of a contrasty situation. Okay. Hopefully that made sense to you guys. All right. So we're going to uh, um, at bring down our blacks. Okay. All right. The white is, I think it's right on point. Okay. White snow looks terrible when it's blown out. You've all seen that, right? But there's a threshold. If you go too dark, then it becomes looking gray and blah looking. So we need to keep the highlights at a certain level, and the level that it's currently at, I feel, is good enough. So this to me is okay. We're gonna maintain that and just bring the other end down darker. Okay. If we look at the what would be the highlight of the water, okay, that's looking a little muddy. Okay, and that's again because the contrast is too low. Those should be a little bit brighter. All right, so we need to make that a little bit bright. Okay. And then as far as color is concerned, what I like to see is the browns. All right. Right now, they're looking a little on the gray side. So I want to introduce a little bit more brown color. So that means adding red, adding yellow, okay, possibly adding a little bit of green, okay, just to give it a little bit more color, a little bit more oomph. All right. On the same respect, all right, we can't add that to the highlight areas because our highlight areas is the snow. All right, so we have a lot of highlight areas where the snow is sitting on top of the branches, so we got to be careful with how we do this. We can't just paint the whole upper part of this image with orange and then the lower part with a cool color. It's not going to work. All right. So, which brings us to the next thing. All right. The snow needs to be cool off. All right. And what's our cool colors? And that would be blue. Okay. Obviously, we don't want to make it too blue because, then it's going to start looking a little bit, too fake. But we kind of want that cooler feel to the snow, right? All right. And the other thing I said is the final thing is we want to bring more attention to the water part, the water element, than everything around it. Okay. Can anybody see anything else that they would suggest making a correction on? Anybody want to pitch in? What would you like to see changed? Edited? No? Okay. All right. So that's our plan. That's our roadmap. Now we have a roadmap. Okay. So how are we going to do this? Well, I've already kind of gave that away. We're going to make it very, very simple. We're only going to use curves adjustments. Okay. So curves adjustments, the nice thing about curves adjustments is that not only can we control the luminosity of an image, okay, we can also manipulate the colors of an image, right? Because we have access to the red, the green, and the blue channels of our image. And you, hopefully you know that if you have the red, the blue, and the green, their opposites are yellow, magenta, and cyan. Okay. So if you can, try to keep this in mind. Try to memorize this, And one of the things that I do is, if you have R, G, and B, all right, the opposite is C, M, Y. All right. So if you do it like this with the three fingers, actually, let me do this. If you do RGB and then you go CMY, all right, they're opposite of each other. So R is the opposite of C, G is the opposite of M, and B is the opposite of Y. And speaking of RGB, I refilled my ink cartridges, so I got I got I got RGB fingers. All right. Oops, wrong button. There we go. Okay. All right, so understanding that, we're going to go with a fairly easy one. All right, I want to take the snow that right now looks kind of warm and muddy looking. I want to cool that off. All right, so how do we do that? We go to our blue channel, okay? And the thing about this is if you go up, if you pull from this line, if you pull this up, it's going to add, okay, it's going to add blue, okay? And if you're going to go down, it's going to subtract blue, all right? Which gives you what? Yellow, okay? So even though you don't see yellow written anywhere in this tool, okay, the negative of blue is yellow, all right? So keep that in mind. All right, so what we're going to do is we're just going to take from the center and we're going to go up, all right? And you notice that everything starts turning blue, all right? And here it is. If you go down, we're removing blue, adding yellow, okay? In this particular case, we don't need a lot of blue, okay? All we want to do is kind of neutralize that yellow cast that is on the surface of the snow, okay? And as a matter of fact, we could even take it from the black point, okay? So this is our black point, and this is our white point. And you've heard me say the white point cannot go wider than white, so that's at the top, and the black point cannot go lower than pure black, that's why it's at the bottom, okay? But we can take it and we can move it up. So what happens is it's going to start adding blue, and it's going to add more blue in the deeper, darker parts of the image, all right, and less. Okay, so here's the problem of doing this. In order to get to the very, very light parts of the snow, we have to move this a great big distance. Okay, and what happens is it may add too much to the darker part of the image. Right, so if we look at the photograph now, it kind of looks like a cyanotype, okay? So that may not be the decision to make, okay? one thing we can do is we can look at our histogram. And if we notice on the tool itself, we have that histogram being displayed, okay? And we can say, okay, well, here's the hump for our darkest pixels, which really is not the snow, all right? And we have a hump here at the beginning, which is our whites, which in this case is our snow. So we may want to add blue there. So I may want to tackle by placing a point here and manipulating that until we neutralize that kind of that yellow color, okay? And what happens at this point, if you notice, if we look at the dark pixels, right, we don't see as much of a blue influence here, all right? And just to show you what I mean, I'm going to take this point up, okay, and I'm going to show you that same area. See how that is highly influenced with blue, okay? So that's one way we can control what part of the color spectrum from white to black we want to manipulate, okay? And as a matter of fact, if you want to, you could even add another point and bring the midtones down, all right? But you can see that there are some midtones in that snow that we do want to influence, all right? So maybe bring this down here. It does the same thing, okay?
Hey, Doug,
Yes.
when you're bringing down the midtones, and this is why I have trouble with curves.
Okay.
In my thinking, I would want to bring it just straight down. Why do you bring it down and right or bring it down and left?
Okay. All right. Great question. And to tell you honestly, it took me a while to figure that out too. All right. Because if you watch a lot of the tutorials, they kind of just grab it in the middle and they bring it up and then that's it, you know, without really explaining why. Okay. But again, if we look at the histogram will give you, let's see if I can make this, it won't make that bigger. Okay. The histogram acts as a guide as to where you can where you need to place these points, okay? If you want to manipulate everything, okay, the best is to just go into center and bring it up, okay? But what's going to happen is it's going to influence, it's going to create the most amount of blue, all right, because here we're working with blue. It's going to add the most amount of blue to this part because we've grabbed it in the center and we brought it up, all right? So the greatest distance of that new curve that we created is from that point to our center point that we started off from. Make sense? Okay. And then you notice that the distance gets smaller and smaller and smaller until we go back to a single point at our white point, and it goes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until we get to a single point at our black point. Follow that?
Yes.
Okay. So now if we understand that the greater the distance that new curve is the greater the effect it's applying to the underlying image. All right. So what it's telling me here is that I am applying more blue in my midtones than anything else. Okay. All right. If I go here, all right, and I bring it up in this in the darks, okay, you can see that the arc has now, because it's the arc is kind of like, I don't want to say sign, it's a um there's a term for it, and I'm missing it right now, but basically the tangent of that point as it goes in, the output is going to be opposite. Okay, so let me see if I can say here. All right, I have a point here, that's my black point, okay, and a point here. All right, and if I connect it, it's just going to be a straight line. Okay, if I make a point here and the line comes in from that point this way, it's going to want to exit in this direction. Okay, make sense? But from this point, it needs to go to this point, okay, and land here. So at some point, it's going to, oops, oh no. All right, how do I get rid of that? I don't remember seeing that before. Okay, sorry. Point, new point. It comes in from here, okay? It wants to leave in that direction. But at some point, it's going to be influenced by the landing point here. So that arc is going to want to curve to meet this point. All right? So all we got to do now is look at that arc. All right? And now we see that, oh my God, what it's actually doing is it's putting more information here than here. All right. Where if my goal is to add more blue to the darks, the shadow side, okay, I might not want to put a point in the shadow side to start. I might want to put a point. Oh, yeah, no, it won't. Okay. Yeah, it won't let me do it unless, yeah. So that's very, I never noticed that. It actually favors the light pixels. You know what? I never noticed that. I learned something new. It favors the light pixels. Okay. But if I want to add more blue in the dark pixels, let me get rid of that point. I might want to just do this. Okay. And now we can see that there's more distance here than there is here. All right. Or we can say, okay, I want to add more pixels in the bright area. So I'm just going to drag this here. All right. And we see that we have more pixels here than we have here, or more influence here, I should say, not pixels, more influence here than here. All right. So where you pick, all right, is determined by the curve of that new, the new line. Okay. This is going to influence the tonality. Okay. If you say, okay, well, you know, I'm influencing a lot in those light pixels, I don't want that. What you do is add a second point and you can bring that back down. So now what we're going to do is we're going to manipulate and add just to the dark pixels. Okay. And you can see in the image here how all the light pixels are still kind of yellowish, and all my dark pixels are blue. Okay. Because if we look at that arc, How visible is this for you guys? Can you see that? Oh, you know what? Let me share my screen. That should,
Yes, you can.
there we go. Okay, that should be better. All right. The blue line here represents my adjustment. Okay. So you can see that by manipulating these points, I can manipulate that curve. So now we have this hump that is greater in the shadow areas, and here in the light area, I have literally no hump. Okay. So that means that I've increased the amount of value, all right, the difference in the shadow edge, and literally nothing in my highlights. Okay. If I want to influence the highlights, I would just do the opposite. Actually, let me go ahead and return that to 0. Okay. If I want to add blue just to the highlights, I would go here. I would bring that up. Okay. And because we are also influencing the shadows, I would place another point and bring that back down. Okay. And now we have a lot of influence. Oops. A lot of influence here and no influence here, which is the opposite, right, of what we did previously. Okay. So look at it as in the terms of, on a scale from black to white, what do I want this effect to influence? All right. And then that's the point you're going to manipulate. Does that make sense to you, Bill?
Well,
Or did I lose
okay.
you?
Let me unmute. Yes.
Okay.
So basically what it is I want to move it so I make the most impact to a certain area, like the highlights or the darks.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. All right. So that's why kind of building that roadmap ahead of time helps, because you can say, okay, I need to target the light pixels. I need to target the middle pixels. I need to target the dark pixels. All right.
What I did today is I was having trouble with the curves, so I used the sliders that go underneath it.
Yep.
And
Okay.
I was
Yep.
what confused me is when I slid the darks, it made it lighter. So is that why?
All right. So we have, all right, let's break this down. Okay. You already know that you have your black point here. Okay. All right. So we have a black point for the tool. All right.
Okay.
We're just going to talk about the tool itself. Okay. This point here is our black. We can't take that point and we cannot bring it down any more than black. You can't get blacker than black.
Okay.
Correct? All right. So we
Mhm.
can't do this. Alternatively, this is, all right, so this is our black point. This is our white point. All right. And we cannot go higher than white. We cannot go whiter than white. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Right. I get it. Mhm.
However, we can do the opposite. We can take our white point. Actually, hold on. Let me go to just RGB. We can take our white point, and you notice as I bring it down, all right, it's saying that the whitest white is going to be at this point. Okay. So
Okay.
here we have 0% white, black. Okay. 0% black.
Mhm.
All right. Means 100% white. All right. We have 25% black. we have 50% black, all right? That's our midpoint, okay? And we have 75% black, and we have 100% black. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. We have the same thing here. We have 0% white. We have 25%, 0% black, 25%, 50% black, 75%, and then 100% black. Okay. So we have, it's a grid. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
I get it.
So now if I take my white point, all right, which is this point all the way up here, and I bring it down, what I'm telling Photoshop to do, all right, and actually here it is, my output, all right, my output is at let me make that to 128 because that's middle gray, okay? So the original pixel, anything that's at 255, all right, which is 100% white, 255, is now going to be 128, which is middle gray. Okay? All right. But because this is kind of a linear adjustment, all right, so we have right here, okay, we have the most amount of reduction in luminosity right here. Okay. So if that dropped by, let's say 50 points, okay, and if we do the math, whatever was middle gray originally, is now what?
By 25%.
By 25%. Exactly. Exactly.
Gray, not
so
gray. Oh, okay.
yeah,
I
so
get
it drops.
All right,
Yes.
I get it.
So now instead of being 50% black, it's now 75% black. All right. And everything that was 75% black is now what?
33%.
No, the other way. 80.
80, we're talking black. Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
80%. Okay.
All right. So it works linearly like that. Okay. Or no, I shouldn't say linear because it's not linear. It's not a linear, there's a term for it. It's a scalar reduction. Okay. All right. So we can manipulate our white point. We can do the same thing with our black point. All right.
Okay.
So here we're saying, all right, all our black pixels are now going to be 50% gray. All our black pixels are going to be 25% gray. All our pixels are going to be 100% white, all right, 0% black, and then we have, a blank page, okay? We can do the same exact thing with our midtone. We can say, okay, here's our midtone. Everything that is 50% gray is now going to be 25% gray.
Okay.
All right. So what we've done is we've made our midtone now lighter. Okay. And because it's on a scale, all right, here we have a 25% increase in luminosity, right?
Yes.
Okay. But this is an arc. All right. They're not straight lines. It's an arc. So in this mid part here, we're going to get 33% of that roughly. Yeah, I don't know the exact math, but you can guesstimate visually just by looking at this arc here of how quickly that reduction is going to go from middle gray to white. Okay. Likewise, we can see how much slower the decay is going to be from middle gray to black. All right. And so what you got to do is just got to look at that new line that you manipulated. The new line that you manipulated. Okay. So now, knowing this, we can say, okay, in our image, what do I want to manipulate? Okay. If you say, well, the snow is too bright, okay, I can take that snow and make it darker. But he says, oh, well, it's also darkening all my trees. Well, I can take my trees, which are more in the darker tones, and bring that back up. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now, obviously, how much you manipulate it, that's where it kind of comes into a visual. You're not going to go by the numbers. You're going to go by how it looks. Okay.
Okay.
All right. And you can say, okay, well, I need to add a little bit more darkness to my shadow area. Okay, this is my shadow area. I added a little bit more darkness to my light areas, which I wouldn't do, but just for an example. Okay, this is my light area. Okay, so you can see this is my original highlight, or my original highlights in my whatchamacallit, in my histogram. All right, so the histogram shows you the everything below this layer. Okay, so as you manipulate it, that histogram is not going to change in this display because it's showing everything below it. Okay, so now what I've done is I've reduced the luminosity of that hump. Okay,
But why didn't the histogram change?
all right, because it's not recording the effect of this layer.
Okay.
All right. So it's going to show you what the original layer that you're manipulating, it's going to show you that histogram.
Okay.
As you add an effect, okay, it's not going to show you that. All right. However, if we look at the histogram in the corner, okay, you will see that change as I manipulate this.
Okay, I can see it because I have this. Okay.
Okay.
Because the way I have my computer set up, everybody's face is sort of hiding the histogram. But now I see it.
Okay.
Do me a favor. Do that. Change something again, just for ha-has.
Yep.
So I can see it.
All right. Here, what I'll do is
Okay, I see the histogram. Thanks.
Yep. All right. So now I'm gonna drop this down to middle gray. I'm going to add another layer. Notice how the histogram looks different now.
Yes.
All right, so now what it's doing is showing me the layer below and everything underneath that. Okay. So whatever I adjust here is not going to change my histogram until I go up one more level. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay, so all right, so let me reset this back to the default. All right, and all right, so in this case, what I want to do is I don't want to change the luminosity at all. What I want to change is the influence of color. All right, so going back to our original, we're going to go to our blue channel. All right, and what do we want to manipulate the blue on? The light pixels. Okay, so I might want to just go ahead and do this, and it's going to change. It's basically going to say I'm going to add more blue in the very, very light pixels. Okay, so I can do it by manipulating my white point in to go again. Here is 0, here's 25%, here's 50%, right? Okay. It would be the same as taking this point, which is at 25% here, all right, and bringing it up. See that? Same thing, okay? All right, except this is more of a curve, whereas if we were to do it this way, it's more of a straight line, okay? So it all depends on what you want to accomplish. 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I think it looks a little bit more natural doing it like this than bringing that white point in, okay? All right, so now I have to make a decision, because what I want to do here is I want to influence the snow only. I don't want to influence the trees or the dark part of the water, okay? Although the dark part of the water doesn't look too bad like this, but I think just for contrast sake, I don't want to influence the water, okay? So now we have to ask ourselves, okay, how do I apply this effect just to the snow? All right. Well, how do we do that? We need to make a local mask. A local mask. All right. We have to basically tell Photoshop just the snow, not the trees. All right. But if I were to try to mask this out manually, you can see this would be a hell of a project. How do you mask that out? You get a small brush and you paint out all the tree branches? No. What we need to do is we need to tell Photoshop somehow that what I want you to do with this layer adjustment is just target the white pixels or the light pixels. Okay? So we can actually do that in a couple of ways. Photoshop is great for being able to do the same thing in multiple ways. All right. The easiest way for me that I tend to go to is to do a blend if. Blend if. All right. So what I want to do is I want to tell Photoshop the blue that I just applied in this curves adjustment, I want you to blend that. All right, here's my layer. I want you to blend that with the underlying layer, which is our image layer. So we have our curves adjustment, we have our image layer. I want you to blend that blue effect only if the pixels in the image are light, not dark. Okay? Keep that in mind. This is how we're going to do it. All right? So the way to do it is typically if you double click anywhere on that layer area in the outside of the icons and the name, just in that blank area, if you double click, what it does is it brings up this dialog box, which is the layer style. And this layer style allows you to do all kinds of nifty stuff, okay? But the default page, the default tab that it lands on is the blending options, okay? The blending options here, okay? And if we look in the center part, we have blending options and then the advanced blending, and then way down at the bottom, blend if. All right? And by default, we're going to keep it to the gray, all right, because we're going to use the luminosity aspect of this image, okay? So if we were to look at it as a gray tone, we have white pixels, we have gray pixels, and we have black pixels, right? So we're keeping the gray tone. All right, so we have our current layer and then our underlying layer. So what's the current layer? What's our current layer? Anybody? Bill, you want to give it a shot?
The current layer is the one that you have for
That's our curves, right? And then the underlying layer is what?
The background.
The image. Yep, the background, the image layer. Okay. So what do we want to do? We want to blend the upper layer into the lower layer. Okay. And what we want to do is we want to blend it only into the highlights area. Okay. So that means that we want to apply that blue effect to this part of our image. Okay. So if we move this or this, all right, what we're telling Photoshop to do is these 2 points, this one here, is going to determine what gets protected, all right, meaning it does not get affected by the layer above it, okay? So what we want to do is we want to protect, all right, so this is a little bit strange in thinking, all right? We are applying an effect, okay? And that effect is going to be applied 100%, all right? I'm going to apply it 100% across the entire image. So what are we doing? We're making our image blue. So it's going to make 100% of the image blue. But we only want to keep the blue in the white areas. So we need to protect the dark pixels from being influenced. So that means everything in our dark pixels, we need to tell Photoshop to protect. So here we have, all right, 0 to 255. So 0 here, 255. All right. What's middle gray? 128. Okay. So pretty much I want to say I want to protect everything from 128 to 0. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this slider, all right, and I'm going to slide it over to roughly 128. Okay. Let me move this out of the way. Right. And actually, yeah. Okay. Let me make this. Let me make this a little bit stronger. Okay. Let's go to the blue. Let's make this very obvious. Okay. All right, so that's very obvious, right? Very obvious blue. I'm going to say everything from 0 to 128 middle gray is going to be protected. Okay. So everything here is now protected. All right. So that means the only thing that the upper layer influences is this part here. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right. But this is a hard break. Hard break. All right. So that means at 128, the value, anything darker than that is going to be protected. Anything lower than that is going to be affected. All right. But that is a hard break. We want to give it a little bit of a buffer, a little bit of a feather. All right. It's not too noticeable here, but actually, and we can even manipulate it to taste. I think I want to go a little bit darker than middle gray, right? So by pressing and holding the Alt or Option key, what I can do now is I can split those 2 points, all right? Split the points, all right? So that means that everything, let me make that a little bit more apparent. Everything from here to here, we're going to have 100% of the blue removed, right? No influence. From here to here, right, we're going to do a decrease, a steady feather into 0, okay? And then from here to here, that's our effect. This is where the blue's coming through, okay? So we go, if we were to look at it, we go from our upper layer, nothing's getting through, to stuff getting through, and then everything coming through. All right. So this here gives us that gradual blend. All right. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. All right. So now the nice thing about using a blend mode is that we can visually see exactly what's being manipulated. Okay. Here's the bad part of it. All right. If I make another layer and I increase all right, the luminosity, okay. Actually decrease the luminosity. There we go. Okay. We can see that the darker we go, all right, the more we're seeing the influence, all right, because of the underlying layer. Where is it? Oh, yeah. What do we want to do? Yeah. So the underlying layer, okay, because we made the next adjustment we made, we darkened everything, right? All these pixels that were excluded are now being included in that blue. All right. So it makes it a little bit problematic because anything we add above this layer is going to affect the blend if. All right. Because the blend if is dependent on everything that happens. Okay. So you have to be very, very careful. If you don't use a lot of layers, you can probably get away with it with this. But if you're going to be doing a lot of manipulation, what happens is you add a layer and suddenly, oh my God, you know, that blend if layer is looking like crap. I now have to go back to that blend if layer and I got to say, okay, well, you know, I got to now remove more of that dark pixels in order to get back to my original concept. All right, so this can be a problem. All right, so how do we alleviate that problem? All right, well, let me get rid of that upper layer. Okay, so, oh, and let me get rid of this. Okay, we're going to reset it. Okay, so now if I don't want my image to be susceptible to that kind of change without me actually affecting the change, I need to rethink this. All right. So now one of the things that we can do is we can say, all right, we're going to make a selection and we're going to make a selection based on a range of luminosity. All right. Rather than using a blend if based on a range of luminosity, because as I manipulate my layers, that range can shift with the blend if. But if I make a mask, no matter what I do above it, that mask will never change. That mask is going to affect just those pixels. Okay. So actually it's already set up from previously. So how do we do this? All right. Right here at the top, we have our highlights. All right. And we can sample by color. All right, so here we have RGB, CMY. All right, and then we have our highlights, midtones, and shadows. Okay, and then we have skin tones, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. All right, in this case, I want to target the highlights. I want to target just the snow part. Okay, all right, and then here's our range. And if we look, we can see this is black, this is white, and this, of course, would be that 50%. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to go to our 50%, all right, which is about 128, right? And I say, okay, I want to go just a little bit more to the shadow side of that 128, okay? And I have a selection preview of a quick mask, okay? So that gives me a preview, that ghastly green, of where my mask is going to be, all right? So you can see everything that is green is not selected. Everything that is white is selected, all right? So this gives me a quick visual, all right? And then the fuzziness is that transition, the edge transition, all right? And it's actually not doing very much, so I'm not going to worry about it, okay? There we go. All right, once it looks like it's selecting what I want, all right, I'm going to say okay. And now I have a mask. Okay, there's my mask. So now, no matter what, all right, if I go here, all right, to my blue, okay, it's just going to influence all the light pixels, okay? If I add another curves adjustment, okay, all right, it's actually, let's see, I'm going to go ahead and deepen down, all right? So here's one of the problems with this, okay? All right, it's only targeting the very, very, very dark pixels, all right? So we have all this modeling here, okay? So you have to be careful, all right? All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to all right, if I darken everything down, all right, it's going to affect everything below it, but now I am just that's it. It's darkening everything, all right? But if we zoom in here, okay, actually, we'll return that. You can see that the brown is still there, okay? It's not affecting the brown. It's affecting the light pixels. Hopefully you guys can see this. I know it's a bit messy, but everything that is snow, everything that is considered a light pixel is now being affected by the blue, all right? Actually, let me make it really extreme. Oh, really extreme. Okay. You can see that the brown is still there. The brown of the trees is still there. The only thing that's being affected is the snow. Okay. Whereas if I had done it the other way with the blend if, we would have lost the brown in the trees altogether. Okay. I know that's probably not the best example, but this particular image isn't, oops, go to the blues. This particular image isn't probably the best example, all right? But we can see that we've taken the yellow snow and we've made it blue, all right? And the trees are still their kind of brownish color, all right? So that was a long way to get here, but hopefully you now understand the tools. Any questions? Did I lose anybody?
I never got all the box.
What's that?
I'm going to have to watch the rerun.
You both. I
Yeah.
came in at the right time though,
Okay.
because listen, I never had any knowledge of that particular tool, and just by listening to the curve and the curve image layers and the blend mode, you know,
The blend if, yeah.
now I get to play with it now, and now I know what I'm looking for.
Right.
So-
Exactly. Awesome. Okay. Well, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to expand on what I just did. So this layer, all right, because we built the mask is already built for us, okay? And what it does is it targets all the snow, okay? We made the snow blue. All right, now what I want to do is I want to take all the trees and we're going to add a little bit of color contrast, and we're going to make the trees a little bit more warmer, okay? So we can rebuild the whole thing from scratch, or we can say, you know, we're already halfway there. The only difference between this layer that we just built and the one that we need for the trees is the inverse, the complete opposite of the layer we already have. All right, so this layer cools the light pixels. Our next one, we want to warm up the dark pixels. So the complete opposite. So that means I can take this layer, Control or Command J to duplicate it, all right? And our mask, okay, which targets the snow, we can invert it. So Control or Command I will invert it, all right? So now what you see here is a mask that just targets the trees and a little bit of the water, obviously, okay? So Control Command I inverts my mask, okay? So if I go back, we can see now that our trees have that blue influence, all right, which is the next thing we need to tackle. We come back here, here's our blue channel, all right? Remember, if we go up, we add blue. If we go down, we subtract blue, which is our yellows, okay? We don't want to go too far and make it, you know, too grossly yellow, just a tiny little bit, okay? That looks pretty good, all right? And again, you know, salt and pepper to taste, all right? And just like that, we have a nice color contrast between the two. As a matter of fact, I might want to even come in here and go to our blue. And you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and do it like this. Really boost that blue a little bit more. Yeah, there we go. Awesome. Okay. So we have more influence in the shadow parts of the of my lights. Okay, so now it looks more like that pristine snow. That the snow should be cool. It should be, you know, it should have those blue shadows. All right, while the trees our trees. They show the brown bark. Okay. Any questions on that so far? All right. All right. The next thing I want to do is I want to add a little bit more contrast, because if we look at the stream, okay, especially the dark parts of the stream, the dark parts match the tonality of our trees. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to darken those. All right. And maybe possibly cool those off just a little bit. Okay. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to add another curves adjustment. So what do I want to do? I want to, actually, while I'm here, I want to see if I can do double duty with this layer and maybe make the white parts of the water a little bit brighter, because right now they are definitely, kind of dark. Okay, so that means my dark tones, all right, my dark tones are here, my light tones are here. Okay, I want to bring my dark tones darker and my light tones lighter. Okay, so I'm going to click and drag down. All right, and it's going to change everything. All right, we'll fix that later. Right now, what I'm going to pay attention to is just the water part. I want to pay attention to this. All right, I don't care about anything else. I'm just going to pay attention there and see how it's affecting it. All right, and I want to bring up my white point up on that, and that actually looks pretty darn good. Okay. All right. Everything else looks horrendous. I lost a lot of detail in the snow. That's okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I am now going to go to my mask. I'm going to invert it, Control I, Command I. All right. And then with a soft round brush, make my brush a little bit. There we go. Soft round brush. Okay. And white. All right. White as my foreground color. All right. You can use the letter X to flip back and forth. X, X, X. Okay. I am going to go ahead and paint in right in here. All right. And you can resize down accordingly. And I'm just going to paint all this area around the water. All right. I'm not going to touch the snow around it. Okay. If you make a mistake, you could always go X. All right. X will invert it, and then you can just paint out your mistake. Okay. So if you hit,
are you painting for detail or for color?
For contrast. All right.
Okay.
So if here, let me zoom in here. Oops. Let me zoom in there. Okay. Before, after, before, after. Okay. So if you look, there's two areas. As I flip back and forth, I want you to look at two areas. You can look at this area or this area. It doesn't matter. Okay. These areas are not being affected. So what you won't see is you won't see any change here. What you will see is changes in the water. All right. So the highlights of the water will get lighter and the dark parts of the water will get darker. Okay. So pay attention to those two areas. Okay. And if you feel that you painted in something a little bit too much, you can always come in with your brush and make whatever changes accordingly. Okay. All right. And now that little bit of contrast makes that stream pop. Okay. Because what we've done is these shadow areas that matched this, all right, when it all looks the same, it all blends together. Okay. By changing the contrast between two elements, it brings attention to one of the elements. All right. So by deepening my shadows in the stream, okay, this goes back to what we discussed about high key and low key, and that quote unquote rule of how your eye goes to light areas first. Okay. In this case, our eye travels to the snow area first. Okay. But within that, if we make the stream darker, our eye centers on the stream a little bit more than if it was the same color as everything else. Okay. Here, plain, boring. I see no need to want to explore that stream because it looks tonality and color wise, it looks the same as the area above. As soon as I apply a little bit of contrast, suddenly there's a little bit more interest. Okay, makes sense? Okay, and if we wanted to, we could even add a little bit of that little bit of contrast to the upper part. You know, so I can get a nice big brush, get white. Here, let me bring this down. Get white as my foreground color. All right, and then just paint up just a little bit on the upper part. Okay. All right. And we have a little bit more balance. Okay. See how that stream pops out as compared to previous? All right. So let's see. Here's before. Here's after. Before, after. Any questions?
Would that photo be considered black and white? Is that because you had it before it was black and white, right?
No, actually, no. It just looks black and white because the image was so devoid of color to begin with.
Oh, yeah.
The color of the trees was influencing the color of the snow because the snow being so bright and reflective, it's actually reflecting the color of the trees. It's picking up that color cast. So it made it flat, blah, ugly, right? And because the scene was so monochromatic to begin with, it looks like a black and white, except instead of being black, it's brown. So it's a brown and white photo.
Brown.
Okay. So yeah, that's a problem. You know, how that's a boring image. How do we fix that? All right. Well, we introduce a little bit of color, a little bit of contrast. There's already a lot of texture there, so we really don't need to go too crazy with the texture. Okay. And we're good to go. All right. I know it's not the most interesting photo, but promise to myself this spring and summer, I'm going to start collecting more interesting photos for these workshops. All right. Any questions before we go on? All right. I'll go ahead and save that. And we go back to, where's my, all right. All right. Let's see. How are we doing for time? All right. Oops. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. So I was going to do that, and this one do a black and white conversion. This pretty much is going to do the same exact thing I did with the trees. You know, so let me skip this in preference for doing a black and white conversion. Okay. All right. If we have enough time, I'll go back to that other one, but I got a feeling we won't. All right. So we're going to take this, open it up in Photoshop. All right. And we're going to convert this to a black and white. And we really can't convert using curves adjustment. Okay. So for this, I'm actually going to apply a black and white adjustment. Okay. Black and white adjustment. And what this does is it allows us to, it says, okay, what I'm doing is I'm taking whatever color pixels are in the image, and I'm going to map it to a close representative if it were devoid of color. Okay. And a lot of times, well, I don't want to get this too convoluted, but there's a couple ways of converting an image. One is to use the black and white conversion. The other one is to just do a desaturate. But what happens when you do a desaturation, the colors don't quite map properly to their luminosity scale. Okay. So that's why I usually recommend doing it like this. All right. Because now when you understand that what this is doing is it's doing a map. All right. It's saying all the red pixels are now going to be gray, but they're going to be this level of gray. All the yellows are going to be a lighter gray. All the blues, the dark blues, are going to be a darker gray. Okay. When we understand that all it's doing is it's mapping, we can say, okay, what it's done is it's given me a default setting. All right. But I'm not too crazy about the default setting. I think everything that is gray, that is red, should be darker. Okay. So if we zoom into this building here, okay, if I remove that, we can see that there's a lot of reds and yellows. Okay. Red and yellow makes this orange color. Okay. So the brick has this orange color to it, right? When we understand that that part of the image, which is now black and gray, is actually orange, we can say, all right, I can manipulate that underlying tone, and it's going to change the luminosity value of the grays. So I can make my reds darker, my yellows a little bit lighter, maybe get a little bit of contrast in there. Okay. And I can manipulate that gray tonality by changing the color value underneath. Okay. All right. It doesn't actually physically change the underlying image. All right. What it does is it changes the way it maps it. So instead of saying, all right, map it at middle gray, I want to map it at a darker gray. All right. Hopefully you're starting to see a little bit of similarity when we discuss tonality. All right. Everything based on that 50% gray, that mid-tone. Okay. So here it is. All right, we got we got, what is it? 300 and negative 200. All right. So somewhere, where is it? Somewhere in here. Let's go to 0. Okay. Somewhere here it's saying that that color gray maps the best to that color orangey red. Okay. And you can say, okay, I want to make it darker. All right. So what we're doing is we're just shifting the luminosity value. Okay. And we can manipulate our image to a certain extent. And you got to remember, everything here is going to be a global adjustment. Okay. And actually, if we see here, there's really nothing in the blues and greens going on here. How about here? Anything in the greens? Nope, nothing. Anything in the blues? Or the cyan rather? Nothing. Anything in the blues? Nothing. Magentas? Nothing. All right, so this image, oh, wait, here we go. We have blue. Let me turn that off. Oh, my computer's slowing down. I think I pushed a little bit too hard. Come on, catch up. All right. Okay, here we go. Blue. There we go. The underlying blue there. Oh, there's yellow there. See, there's no green, there's no cyan. That's why it doesn't have an influence, all right? The blue there, okay? I can make it darker, I can make it lighter, all right? So in this case, I think darker so it matches the tonality of everything else a little bit, okay? Anything going on with cyan? Oh, a little bit in the sky. All right, so we can bring that in. Any magenta? Nothing. I know we have yellow here. Okay, we're going to make it a little bit darker. Okay, so these are all global adjustments. Okay, but what I want to do is I want to create a little bit more contrast here. All right, so now anything we apply above this is going to target gray pixels. It's not going to target color. Okay. So we put another curves adjustment. Okay. And what I might want to do is say, okay, you know, let's see if we can pull any detail from that sky. Can we pull any detail from the sky? All right. So we want to make whatever clouds are there a little bit lighter. Okay, maybe. All right. And again, these are all artistic choices. And the one thing that I failed to do for this one is I failed to write out a plan. I have no roadmap. Okay. So that's okay. Sometimes it's just fun to experiment. So let's experiment. Okay. Or we can say, you know, what would happen if instead of a sky with any kind of detail, you know, we just have a white sky. All right. That might work okay. A white sky and then have the building just against a white sky. Okay. Well, if we brighten the sky, it's also going to brighten our foreground. We can't have that, right? So what do we need to do? We need to create a mask. What do we need to mask? We need to mask our sky. All right, so it just so happens when we go up to select, all right, we already discussed color ranged. We have subject and we have sky. So we're going to click on sky, let it do its thing. And there is our selection of everything that it considers to be a sky. All right. And if we look, some very bright areas of this, it's it's thinking that it's sky. Why? Well, if we look at the tonality, the tonality of this area and the tonality of this area, all right, this, all right, it looks like a smiley face, is equal to this. They match, right? So the program thinks that's part of the sky. So to clean it up, we just go to our lasso tool, make sure that we are in we are in add mode, okay? And, oh, no, I had it right the first time, subtract mode. And we are going to subtract that from our mask, all right? We're going to look at other areas, all right? When you clean up your mask, you want to be careful. The better your mask, the better your selections, the better your results, okay? All right. Now, obviously, we can spend some time here, okay? And actually here we need to get this part of the building here. There we go. Right. The other way we can do it, is by painting on the mask. Oops. Where is it? Oh, there we go. Add. I'm gonna leave this area. I'm gonna leave this area alone. I'm not gonna clean this up here. I'll show you another way we can clean this up. Okay. So we have our selection. All right. Let me just put that in. Okay. We're gonna go to our mask. Make sure the mask is selected. Okay. And we're going to press the delete key. All right. As long as you have white as your foreground color and black as your background color, all right, it's going to make that just a delete key. Otherwise, you have to do the alt delete. Okay. Once you have your mask, we can get rid of the marching ants. Control Command D gets rid of the marching ants. And this is our mask. Okay. And you can see that the mask is not 100%. All right. It's not 100% black, 100% white. There are some parts that are gray. Okay. And this is because the auto masking thinks there's a certain amount of influence from the sky in these areas that when you manipulate the tonality of the sky, manipulating these areas will also help. All right. So now we have to do a little bit of cleanup. Okay. So how can we do that? Well, one of the things we can do is while you are in the mask layer, right? So you get there, you Alt or Option, click on the mask. Okay. Allows you to edit your mask. What we can do now is go to Image, Adjustments, and I usually go with Levels Adjustment. You can do the same thing with curves. Since this is a curves tutorial, let's do curves. And what do we want to do? We want to make our black point blacker, and we want to make our white point whiter. Okay, so we're going to take our white point and we're going to bring it in. Okay, and anything that is light colored pixel, it's going to make it whiter. Okay, and anything that is black, we're going to push into the blacker. All right, so all we're doing is we are increasing the contrast between the black and white pixels, and we're getting rid of all those gray pixels for the most part. Okay. Any questions on how I did this? We hit OK. All right. And now we have a few little leftovers. Okay. So at this point, we can just get a brush. Let's make it smaller. All right. And I usually get a hard edge brush. All right. White as my foreground color for these areas. And I'm just going to paint out any areas that need painting out. Okay. Remember here. All right. These parts. Oops. Be careful. These parts we're going to get rid of. All right. If you want to check, just click out of it. All right. If you want, you could even, don't paint on the image or paint on the mask. Okay. Alt brings you back in. And then you can clean up your mask. I'm not going to do a lot. I'm not going to go too crazy with cleaning up this mask. All right. I'm just going to show you. Okay. Make it according to size. There we go. Clean up, clean up, clean up, clean up. There we go. Control 0. All right. Any questions about cleaning up a mask? All right. So now I have my mask. What I can do is at this point, I can say, okay, I'm going to, what's going on? Well, we need to invert our mask because we selected the sky. We want to actually mask out the sky. We actually want to mask out the building. Okay. We selected the sky. We masked out the sky. We actually want to mask out the building. So we're going to go back to our mask, Control I, invert it, and now we can manipulate our sky. Okay? Make sense? All right. And now suddenly, that building pops a little bit more. Okay? All right. Another curves adjustment. Okay. This time what I want to do is I want to make the mid-tone parts a little bit more contrasty. All right. So now anytime you use these tools, remember it's going to be a global adjustment. As long as that mask is white, it's going to be a global adjustment. It means it's going to affect everything. So when you do that, you have to understand what is it that I want to manipulate, okay? And how much do I want to manipulate it, all right? And then just look at that area. So let's say, for example, I want to take this part of the building, all right? And I want to make it a little bit lighter. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to push my curves upwards. Okay. And if you notice, it's doing it globally. All right. So now what I want to do is invert my mask, Control I, get my brush, make it. All right. And this time I want to make a nice soft brush. White as my foreground color, all right, and I'm just going to paint in what I want to change, okay? And if you want to create something a little bit more restrictive, all right, the other way you can do it is that you can make a selection. So let's select all, delete, okay. We can make a selection of just the area that we want to manipulate, okay. So go to my lasso tool, I'm going to use the polygon tool. I'm just going to do a very quick mask of this area. Of course, the cleaner you make your selection, the better it is. Let's see, do I want this? Yeah, we'll do all of this, and come up here. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and remove this area here. Hold the Option key, allows you to remove. Okay, good enough. Okay, and then Control I to invert. Get rid of the marching ants. Okay. And Control I to invert the entire mask. So now what I have is just that part of the building that I can manipulate. Make sense? Okay. So now what we can do is we can say, okay, I can use this particular one and maybe do other parts of the image that are the same. Or you can say, okay, I want to have a little bit more better control. So for maybe this building here, I might want to create its own layer. All right. So create a new adjustment layer, come in, do the same exact thing. This time, let's see, what do I want? I want just this part of the building. I'm not going to worry too much about the black. No, here. Alt or Option allows me to remove. Okay. Come here. Delete or, okay, remember to add your mask, you want the foreground to be white, the background to be black. Okay. So X, hit the delete key, get rid of the marching ants, and then invert the whole thing because I want to target just the building. Oh, gotta let Photoshop catch up. Come on. There we go. Got hung up there for a second. All right. So there we go. There we go. Control minus. What do I do on my, oops. Okay. There we go. And then now you can manipulate to your heart's content. Okay. Another way you can do it, you can go to your select and you can do a color range. Let's say you want to do the midtones. Okay. You can say, okay, I want, very specific parts of the midtones. Okay. And say, okay. There we go. Oh, wait a minute. Do a curves adjustment. And then because everything was selected, it's going to automatically make a mask. Here's my mask. Okay. Pretty convoluted, but we can manipulate it. Okay. So maybe make it a little bit darker. All right. And let's say I just want to target the buildings over in this area here. I can go back to my mask and I can say, okay, nice big black brush. All right. Let me make it bigger. And I can get rid of all of this and just remove everything except what I want to manipulate. All right. And now I can make that lighter, darker as I see fit. Okay. All right. Any questions on any of this? Okay, I'm kind of glossing over because by this point, this should be pretty much second nature. All right.
But fried brains is second nature? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
On the way to and just overall, so this type of thing we're doing, this is because of some of these layers separating with the colors and stuff, this is better than say Lightroom to try this kind of stuff.
All right. So Lightroom is a little clunky when it comes to masking individual parts. All right. So Lightroom will be able to convert to black and white. It will be able to allow you to manipulate the underlying color channels. All right. Just like we did here. All right. And you can mask, but when it comes to like architectural masking, Lightroom fails because you don't have the precision. All right. You can't take a lasso tool and say, okay, what I want to do is I want to mask this. All right. And then be able to use the lasso to give you those nice, hard, fairly crisp edges. Okay. And say, okay, now I want to make a adjustment based solely on that,
Well, what I want to try this on, my interest, I have, I just joined a new Facebook group. It's black and white blues photos.
Right.
So I've got some of those, but I got a couple old, the ones I've been working on. It's an old scan, but it's a color photo. And I thought, now let me cheat and turn this one into a nice looking black and white. I was just playing around with some of the presets in Lightroom a little bit, but they were less than desirable, I guess.
Yeah. So one of the things that you'll want to do, all right, any edit you make, let me switch. Any edit, I don't care what the subject is. I don't care, if it's color or black and white. There's going to be 3 things that you're going to edit on every image. Luminosity, color, texture. Okay. Now, when it comes to black and white, you can see that when you manipulate colors, you are actually manipulating the underlying color, which is affecting the grayscale values. Okay. So even though it's monochromatic, you are still manipulating the underlying color, right, in order to get a certain effect. Okay. But where every image is going to shine the best is with the dodging and burning, and that's manipulating the exposure values of very specific areas. All right. And this is where masking is important. All right. So, for example, let's take this. All right. And you say, okay, well, you know what? This image is a water tower that's wrapped in vinyl. It's got that bright blue. Actually, if we go and look at it, it's got this bright blue wrap. It's probably an advertisement. We're just seeing the backside because there's the seam behind the ladder. And right over here, you can kind of sort of make something out there. But there are all these little bokeh balls from the design. Okay, see all of these? Now they stand out fairly well because it's color. All right. As soon as we manipulate it, okay, and turn it into black and white, we lose that contrast. So so when you are creating your roadmap, you have to look at the little things and say, okay, when I convert, what do I lose? What do I need to bring back? All right. And it's usually going to be in the form of contrast. Okay. And if we do any kind of editing, whether it's color, luminosity, or texture, what we are doing is we're manipulating the contrast in all of those three. All right. By increasing the contrast, it gives us more attention to that specific area. All right. So now we can say, okay, I'm going to make another curves adjustment. All right. And what I want to do is I want to make those little spots, those little bokeh balls, I want to make them a little bit brighter. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my curves adjustment. I'm going to bring it up. Right, and you can see that it's affecting everything in the image, not just the little bokeh balls. But what I want to do is I want to say, okay, how much brighter do I want to make them? So I'm going to look at just the bokeh balls, and I just need a little bit of brightness. All right, I'm going to go back to my excuse me. I'm going to go back to my mask and invert it. Control I. So now that hides the effect. So then I can go to my brush and I can take a brush and I can, with white as my foreground color, all right, white is my foreground color, I'm going to paint on that mask and I'm going to bring those little bokeh balls back, right? And of course you're going to go in the basically in this point, I'm just painting those little areas. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm punching a hole in that mask. Make this a little bit smaller. Okay. And if I go back here, I can, make them lighter or darker accordingly. Okay. And in this case, I just want to go a little bit brighter, just to give a little bit of pop. Oops. Make sure you're back on the mask. All right. And if you make a mistake, X. Oops. Okay. There we go. Boom, boom. And you're gonna just, go accordingly to what it is that you want to accent. In this case, it's very obvious what I want to accent. Oops. Let's make that. Okay. But, when you're dealing with like people, all right, it makes it a little bit trickier. There we go. All right. Before, after. All right. So now we made that feature a little bit more prominent. Okay. Let's see if I have an image of the tutorial images. Let's go classroom. All right, we'll do this one. It's not a person, but we'll be able to tell. Okay. All right. Now I'm making it small on purpose. And if you squint your eyes a little bit, all right, you can see that the bird kind of disappears. All right. So now we got to say to ourselves, okay, what do we need to manipulate? Okay. Well, actually, let's go ahead and create a black and white layer because you're talking about doing black and white manipulation. Okay. We need to create some kind of contrast, some kind of separation, because right now, as it is, it's hard to see what the subject is. Okay. Make sense? Okay. So we need to add some contrast. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we're going to do, let's get a curves adjustment. We have to make a decision. How do I want to manipulate the tonality on my subject? Do I want to make my subject brighter than my background? Or do I want to make my subject darker than my background? But that's going to be dependent on the lighting situation for the given image. In this case, the lighting image is a little bit questionable. Okay. So in this particular case, I feel that it would be beneficial if we darken the background and keep the bird bright. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is, in my global adjustment, I'm going to darken the entire image. Okay. Now, I don't care about the bird at this point. All I care about is my background, because the background is what I am going to be manipulating. All right. And in this case, going back to what we discussed earlier with you, Bill, all right, where do we grab that curve? Well, if we grab it in the middle, we are saying, all right, we are going to manipulate our midtones the most. Okay. And you can see that the midtones are getting darker, but look at those highlights. Look at those points of highlights. They barely move.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So now
Right.
what's my goal? What is my goal with this particular image? The
You wanna make
goal
the bird
is
lighter and the background darker.
right. So do I want those highlights darker?
Yes.
Yes. So instead of grabbing it from the middle, what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab it from the highlight and I'm going to bring my white point down. Now look at those highlights.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
See how they are now much more diminished? Okay.
Mhm.
If we say, okay, well, the highlights came down, but I think my midtones are a little bit too dark, then we can go to our midtones and we can bring it up just a touch maybe. Okay. We don't want to flatten it out. All right. And what I mean by flatten it out is we look at coming out of our white point. All right. If this is too flat before we reach there, the image looks dull. Okay. So we got to be careful with how we manipulate that. So we're going to take it from here and just go up a couple clicks. Okay. Now we have our background the way we want. Now all I got to do is at this point say, okay, I don't want to have this influence the bird. So I'm going to go for my brush. I'm going to go for a nice soft brush. Okay. Black as my foreground color because we want to we want to remove the effect here, all right? And notice I'm not being very careful, all right, with the brush. As a matter of fact, I might even want to brush this in, okay? If I go a little bit too far, I can always come back in, all right? And just like that, we went from this to this, okay?
Mhm.
All right. Now I say, okay, well, that's good and dandy, but it's still not enough contrast. What I want to do is I want to see a little bit more contrast on our foreground elements. Okay. So what is our foreground elements? Well, obviously the bird. Okay. We need to make sure that the bird stands out, and we have the tail feathers here. Notice I didn't really manipulate anything on the tail feathers on this pass. Okay. And we also have the branch that the bird is sitting on. All right. This little bit here. Okay. And this branch here that kind of goes below it. All right. And maybe even a little bit of that branch behind it. Okay. So all of that tells the story of the subject. So it's not just the bird itself, but what the bird is sitting on. Okay. Because if I do just the bird itself, it's going to look fake. But if we add that branch that it's sitting on and bring that into the light, it adds to the story. Make sense?
Mhm.
All right. So now, remember earlier we built one mask and we used it for the inverse? We really can't do this because we are doing more with our mask than just the bird, and actually just the upper part of the bird. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and make another curves adjustment. This time, what do I want to do? I want to add light. Okay. But we have the eye of the bird. Okay. I don't want to blow that out, so I have to be careful. So I'm going to go from the middle and start adding light. Okay. And maybe keep that eye in check. Okay. All right. So that looks pretty good. Okay. We're going to now invert the mask. Control I. Again, get a nice soft round brush. White as my foreground color. I am now going to paint in my bird. All right, and I'm going to be a little bit more careful here. Okay, because I want to be very particular as to what I paint in. All right, and if I make a mistake, I just press X to bring black as my foreground color, and voila. Actually, I think that is a little bit too much in the background, so I'm going to tone that down just a little bit. Okay. And I'm going to leave the eye out. Maybe even a little bit of the face. There we go. Okay. So that's before and that's after. Before and after. Okay. So let me go ahead and group that. Control that. Okay. So this is what it looked like before. I said I want to convert it to a black and white. That's before and that's after. Before and after. Obviously, I'd probably do something with a little bit of local contrast on the feathers, okay? But you get the gist of how you can use, light and shadow to direct the eye. Okay? Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Yeah, we're good.
Awesome. All right. Definitely don't have time for the last image. So, any final questions anybody may have before I let you all go?
Not a question, but I agree with Alan. This has really been, that input output down there always perplexed me, and I want to really go back and just putz around with some images to kind of get a handle.
Yeah.
Something to Doug.
Yeah. Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I
So,
have to look at that all over again. Boy, oh boy, I tell you.
I know you get your money's worth, right?
Yeah, they allow them to retain it and play with it to get it
Yeah.
used to.
Let me tell you, what really did it for me is understanding that 50% gray. All right. So once you have that 50% gray and everything to one side is white and then everything to the other side is black, and all you're doing is manipulating, one side or the other. Okay. Once I understood that, it kind of clicked on me. And, I don't know. I'm trying to make it so it clicks for you guys, but it's hard. It's a hard concept to grasp. It really is.
Well, I know it's hard for me right now, and it's not, I don't know if it's directly with the 50%, but it's still with the analyzing the picture. And I would look at something and not think, well, that needs texture, that needs this, that I'm not to that. Once you get and explain it, once you analyze it and then you start working on it, I go, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, still getting to that point is still my challenge.
Well, if you notice, especially when we're doing stuff with Lightroom, what's the first question that I always ask every image? What's the story? That's when you take the picture.
Yeah.
When you go to edit it, what is wrong with this image? What is blatantly wrong with this image? All right. So when you see an image like this, okay, what is blatantly wrong with this image?
There's no contrast between.
There's no, absolutely. That's the first thing that jumps out at me is the lack of contrast. Okay. Stop right there, because what Bill said is the key. All right. Everything hinges on contrast. So what we need to do is we need to increase the contrast in order for our subject to stand forward from its background. Okay. And we can tell that because we know what the image is about. We have a very strong subject and a very weak background. Okay. So now, understanding that it's all about contrast, all right, you now have the tools, because contrast comes in three forms. Okay, what are they? Who wants to give me that answer? We are manipulating three things in this image. What are they?
Luminosity,
Yep.
color, and texture.
Exactly. Okay. So we are increasing contrast between color, luminosity, and or texture. Okay. All right. So let's look at each one of these. Okay. If we if we squint our eyes and blur the image, okay, what jumps out at us? No wrong answers here. All right. Squint your eyes, look at the image. What jumps out?
Great.
Eyes in the wing. Eyes in the wing.
Yep. The eyes and the wing. What else?
Well, the lack of color in the background. Right?
The what?
The lack of color or contrast in the background. That jumps out to me.
Oh, okay. But there's actually something else about that background that really, really jumps out. Okay, remember, squint your eyes.
The hot points.
The hot points.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. So now you've identified 4 areas that need correcting. Okay. So let's break them down. The hot points. What category does that fall under? So remember, it's one of 3.
Luminosity.
Luminosity. Okay. The bird's wing. What does that fall under?
Color.
Color. Awesome. You guys got it. All right.
No, just got lucky.
All right. The bird's eye.
Texture.
Texture.
Yep.
Or luminosity.
Oh, well, yeah, it's not texture. It's not texture.
Yeah. All right.
So,
So
what is it? Is it luminosity or texture? And so what does that determine then how you would bring that eye out? Because that's what you want to do, right?
okay. All right. So here's the thing. All right. In this particular case, I can see where it could be a little bit confusing. All right. Typically, the order that I go in is luminosity, color, texture. All right. As far as importance. Okay. Because luminosity right off the bat is going to direct the eye. Okay. Right below that, a very close second. All right. Some will argue it's even with luminosity. I tend to put it a little bit below it, is color. Okay. Because color contrast will attract you to a specific part. Okay. But the vibrance of that color is dependent on the luminosity level. Okay. Because when it comes to color, and here we're going to go a little deep, you have your true tone color. Okay. True tone color is what is the color of that object. All right. So the wing, what is the color of that object? It's green. Okay. Highlights are anything that is brighter than the true tone color, and shadow is anything that is darker than that true tone color. Okay. So when you look at this, you can ask yourself, is that the true tone color I want to represent? My opinion, all right, salt and pepper to taste, is that it's a little muted. Okay. I would like to see a little bit more vibrance in that color green, right? Okay. But it's also going to be dependent on the luminosity that's applied to the bird in order to make it stand off from the background. So if we were to strip this image of color, luminosity is the most important part. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So luminosity, color, texture. All right. So now let's say we've done some editing. We've resolved the luminosity issue. We resolved the color issue. We made the parrot a little bit more greener. Okay. Now it's time for the texture. Okay. Texture contrast between subject and background. All right. And we can already tell that we've taken a step forward in how we want to present it just by the choice of aperture that we used in the field. All right. That was a conscious choice out in the field to use a very specific aperture that does what to our background?
Blurs it.
Blurs it out. What does that do to texture?
It lessens the texture on the background,
Absolutely.
so we can have more on the bird.
Absolutely. So we're already in the camera, we're manipulating that texture contrast. So what we want to do with our edit is we want to enhance that. We want to bring it out. We want to add a little bit more surface texture so that the feather texture comes forward. All right. And only apply it to the bird. Let the background, which is already soft by the lens, stay where it is. Or if we want to, we could even apply more blur. Okay. But that's how you approach it. You guys have the parts. You're already there. All right. It's just, we just need to reinforce it.
It just occurred to me while you explained this that I do this. I guess I never really put some of the things that I maybe it's subconsciously or I know what to do, but I never really understood that I was, oh yeah, here I am manipulating texture because, anyway. It's helped a lot to think that in that way so that how to get past like that one reason I asked the question and you look at that picture when you turn it black and white, the first thing you do is you go, eh.
Yeah.
So I need to get past that and go, what's the and
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Funny what you said
Yeah.
about forests here in Connecticut. It's not like other places. I see so many people who take pictures in the woods and they just look awful. It's just like it's a lot of trees. It's like, why are you doing that?
Yeah. Yeah. There, I'm very jealous of the photographers that live in like the UK and Ireland and England, where they have all those beautiful old world forests with those very fat moss covered beautiful character trees, or the people out in the plains where you have this just a field of nothing and then just this one tree, uh, uh,
Or the redwood forest and
or yeah.
yeah, in California. A picture of, I know I'm going off tangent here, but a picture of a big tree uh, by itself, you have to be there to see it. So maybe if you're going to
Yeah.
take a picture, maybe you need to have a person stand next to the tree to show how tall the tree is.
Right. Yeah, scale is yeah, definitely important. It's one of the keys. So,
I didn't ever take a picture, but I once slept inside of a redwood tree.
oh yeah.
Had about a 7-foot knot in it and just enough room for me to fit in it. Luckily, no critters were living there.
Well, go to show you how long ago I was out there. Was I was there for training at work, and we had the weekend free. And what was state of the art then, in I think 2002, was for digital was a Sony. That pixel was 640 by 480.
Wow. Yeah.
And we thought it was state of the art.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember that camera. It was what store was that at? And I remember looking at it, it was like a box, like a lunch pail.
It was very boxy, yeah.
Okay. Any final questions?
Oh, good. I got one side of my mind is frozen.
Oh my goodness.
I'll have question. I'll have questions next week about.
Okay. Well,
Yep,
hope.
Doc,
Yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
gonna say thanks for everything. I'm signing off.
All righty.
Thanks, Doc. Have a nice night.
We'll see you next week. Bring your questions with you.
Okay, have a good one.
All right. Take care, guys.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.